Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us tmosso@the1916company.com for purchase and pricing and availability details. Today we discuss a 2005 model year 1,000-piece limited edition in stainless steel. From Panerai, this is the Luminor Marina Militare PAM 217. So the PAM 217, a Destro, or a watch designed to be worn on the right hand ostensibly. It's actually an ambidextrous piece, and anyone can wear it, and I'll demonstrate that to good effect in a moment. It is large, however, so you better recognize that when you buy a Panerai, big is the intended effect. These are never supposed to look proportional. 47 millimeters in diameter. It's a sort of Destro 1950 case, and then 17.5 millimeters thick, 57.1 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, with a 26 millimeter spacing between the lugs. So I'm a righty. I'm going to put this right-handed watch on the wrong wrist, and you can see it wears just fine. The timepiece is easy to wear, and in particular, if you do articulate your hand up a lot, you might find that it is even less likely to gouge you than the standard Luminor would be. Now, if you want to put it on the other wrist, it just wears like a standard left-hand watch, but this can be worn on either wrist. That's definitely the intent of the designer, so don't feel boxed out if you're not a natural lefty. Now, in terms of how it fits, let me just qualify this by saying these lugs do project beyond the edge of my wrist, but I actually think I could pull this off. Because huge is the intended effect of these, the usual no-go sign of lugs that overlap the wrist, here I'm going to say not a problem. If your wrist is my size or larger, you can definitely pull this off, or I should say, put it on. Taking a look in profile, it is surprisingly compatible with a cuff for something that's almost 18 millimeters thick, because there are so many steps to the case flank and then a bubble-like sapphire, and it is a sapphire, not a plexiglass. Let's take a quick look at the watch in detail. The strap here, a little bit more upscale than we typically see on Panerai, where you might think perhaps a textile strap, rubber, or calfskin. We actually have large rectangular scale, symmetrical scale alligator leather and a semi-gloss finish and a dark brown. So this is a more expensive strap than you typically see on a PAM. And you can see it is just as substantial as the watch. It's got a broad sort of sheer cut like profile, but it is actually folded at a right angle, which is a different kind of look, but you can see how that works over and around. With calfskin on the back, you can see a brand new Panerai factory strap, no crimping, no gouging, and the watch does not feature fotina. We have a little bit of an ecru coloration to the contrasting stitch, however. This is one meaty strap, and this is one meaty pin buckle. You can see it's the well-known satin brushed steel trapezoidal pin buckle featured on many Panerai watches. Removable bars are fixed by screws, no spring bars here. For you Paneristi, if you are a Paneristo, you know that strap swapping, custom straps, OEM alternatives, changing the look of a watch with a strap, owning 10 straps for every watch, that's part of the culture. And so you will find there are probably more aftermarket options in the strap department for a Panerai watch than for any other brand, and that includes Rolex. So get to work, buy yourself a jeweler's screwdriver, and start strap swapping. Of course, later Panerai watches would feature spring bar retention. This is what you want to see. Now, the watch features what would conventionally be called the 1950 style case, which say not the rectangular, or I should say maybe even square prism of the original Alessandro Betterini case that debuted with the first civilian Officine Panerai watches in 1993. That was like a little square matchbox. This is a bit more complex, more like the 6152 combat watches of the 1950s. It's all satin finished for a muted tone until you get to the bezel, which is polished for a little bit of contrast. We have the device protecting the crown here, and you can see because this model was pre-2007, it doesn't have the little runner bearing in the cam, but it works brilliantly to do what it was intended to do, which is to allow you to unlock a crown by simply pulling a lever. Back in the day when all Panerai watches used manual wind to pocket watch calibers, the constant screwing of a crown in and out of the original Rolex-made Oyster cases was wearing down the stem tube assembly and the crown seals. So in the late 40s, for the 1950s production, Panerai came up with this idea of a crown guard that offers more protection than a shouldered crown guard, but also has this cam-based encased lever to lock and unlock the system. Truth in advertising, you can see there's a little bit of gouging here. This is a pre-owned watch, but these are very small marks. Now, this offers you protection against a blunt perpendicular impact. A shouldered crown guard doesn't do that. Also, it's hard to drown your watch because that's easier to see than a crown that's screwed out a few threads. And if your hands are wet, sweaty, or gloved, it's easier to lift a lever than to turn a tightly screwed crown. The watch does have 100-meter water resistance, so you can absolutely take this swimming. And by the way, you know what brand and you know what model line just by looking at that. That is the most iconic crown guard design in all of watches. Underneath the bubble-like plexiglass evocative sapphire, we have a sandwich dial, which is to say a stencil on top of a fully loomed disc. In an element of richness, we also have rose gold plated hands, and I'm going to demonstrate now to you just how luminous this watch is. Historically, Luminor was the name of a less radioactive paint than the previous product, Radiomir. That's where those names came from. But in the modern day, Luminor typically describes a watch with this device protecting the crown, which is what it's technically called. Now, we don't have hacking seconds, but we do have a couple of other refinements on this caliber OP11. Based on the Unitas later ETA 6497, it's a 37mm pocket watch-sized manual winder with a 56-hour power reserve, a 3 Hz beat rate. It pivots on 17 joules and it has a COSC Swiss chronometer certification. This is about as nice as any 6497, both in terms of the finishing, which is mechanical but handsomely and thoughtfully chosen. And then in terms of the spec, because a standard 6497 has a lot less power reserve, a lower beat rate, and no COSC cert. You can also see Panerai specific elements like the cut of the bridges, the finishing, and the use of this black polished swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism to complement the Edachron for timing and beat error correction. Lots to love here. This is one for the traditionalists, whether you wear it on your left wrist or your right, an ambidextrous left-hand crown. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.